Welcome to Designing the Future. This series is a space for dialogue, reflection, and imagination, where Indigenous voices lead the way in rethinking the systems that shape our lives. From education and healthcare to governance, economies, and beyond, we'll explore how Indigenous knowledge, lived experience, and cultural wisdom can guide us towards a more inclusive and equitable tomorrow. The conversations you'll hear are grounded in story and spirit. They are not just ideas, but lived realities that carry both resilience and responsibility. Some of what we share may be sensitive, as it touches on histories of harm, systemic inequities, and ongoing struggles faced by Indigenous peoples. We encourage you to listen with openness and care, and to remember that healing and transformation come through truth, respect, and relationship. This is not simply a podcast or a video series. It's an invitation to imagine new possibilities, to engage critically, and to act collectively. Together, let's design a future that honors Indigenous knowledge and creates space for equity, dignity, and respect for all. I'm your host, Laura Mueller, and this is Designing the Future. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining me again for this episode of Designing the Future. Today, we have Lorna Gillanders and my very dear friend. We go to school together at the University of Northern British Columbia, and today we're here to talk about education. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you introduce yourself to the viewers.
Oh, well, it's so interesting to introduce myself to viewers who I don't see, but I'm going to believe that you're out there, okay? And I'm glad you are. Name is Lorna Gillanders, and fourth-year student at UNBC, BA in General and majoring in First Nation Studies. Originally Ojibwe from Manitoba. Yay, Manitoba! All you out there, woohoo! Yeah, I'm very pleased to be able to be here to talk about education, and it's my first time ever doing this, so this is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, the goal of this, what we're trying to look at, to get a better understanding of, where we're at right now, where we want to be, how we're going to get there. So in terms of your education experience, you're at this pinnacle moment where you're just about to wrap up. And how has this experience been for you? I know that's a big question, but what comes to mind when you think about your experience?
How much time did you say we had?
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I guess to try to put it in a nutshell, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's been transforming. Mm-hmm. It's been all those wonderful positive words that I have not experienced growing up, being a 60s survivor. And I don't believe I received, obviously, the same education as my counterparts. I also was not encouraged to pursue education. Being put into remedial classes always signified that you were a little on the not so bright side. Yeah. So a lot of misconceptions, misbeliefs, and whatnot. So coming to UNBC the first time, because it has been a journey, the main reason that I did was for financial. It was a means to an end. I got funding from my band to be able to attend. So I was able in that respect to help the family financially. Yeah. When I started, I had no idea because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe I had the intelligence whatsoever to do this. And I thought, well, here we go. I have no idea. As I progressed, it became clear to me that there was more inside of me than I knew existed, let alone believed possible, right? Yeah. The encouragement that I received from staff, especially fellow students, was phenomenal because being an older student, I am 75, shockaroo, the students accepted me, which made the biggest difference in all the world for me.
It's a huge welcoming community.
To have such an age gap, for me, it was like walking alongside my great-grandchildren. I mean, they appeared to be so young, but absolutely. Yet very encouraging. And just the look of hope in their eyes as they are pursuing their education encouraged me because I thought anything is possible. So I thought, well, let's do it. And as I continued, and received the grades that I got, that Jiminy crickets, I think I can do this.
Yep.
And so I kept going. And the further I went, the more excited I became. So now that I am in my 4th year, I am in my last class before graduating, and I'll walk and hopefully not trip across that stage in May. That's my biggest fear. To be able to do it is an accomplishment for myself. I started years ago, and I wanted to be the example for my granddaughters. I've got 2 little ones.
That's beautiful.
And the example is that when you start something, finish it.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me just this morning, asked me a question. And I was so surprised that the response that I gave was fear. Do not let fear stop you. Do not let age stop you. It's not too late. For me, when I look at what is too late was when you are 10 feet under, pushing up those daisies. Well, then, okay, maybe that is a bit too late.
Yeah.
But as long as you're still breathing, take back what you never received. Take back what was taken from you or never even offered to you. There's more inside of each of us than we can even think of. And through circumstances of life, conditioning, what have you, I think of residential school individuals, 60s individuals. I don't like to use the word survivor because I think it's more than that.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? And I just haven't come up with the right word yet. But I just know it's more than that.
Yeah.
And there's more to the individuals in each one of them. And I just, because of my own experience, I believe that for everybody else too. So what I'm doing is not just for myself. It's a responsibility.
Yes.
Bringing others with me.
Yeah.
I hopefully will be an inspiration for other women, men, whoever. If you haven't done it, try it. At least if you never accomplish, never reach the end, you can have that satisfaction of saying, I started it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that's a common theme with fear and that identity, that imposter syndrome, right across the board. So what kind of, tools, resources, what kind of supports do you think would help mitigate some of that?
Such a big word. I will stick with the word support. Again, I will just refer it right back to the students. If it wasn't for the students, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the First Nation Center when I entered campus on orientation day, I had that fight or flight moment.
Agree.
I almost...
Oh, that's
I don't
interesting.
know. I found myself running down the hall. Literally, I was running.
Yeah.
I heard about the First Nations Center, and I think to me the ancestors led me there because I walked in the door. There was a chair right by the door, and I just plunked myself in there.
Yeah.
I was able to catch my breath, and I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're too old for this. The old negative stories, right?
Yeah.
And I forget who the staff were at the time, but they were so inviting, so encouraging.
Yeah.
And when I walked in that door and sat down, one of the first things I experienced was a sense of safety.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and a peace, a safety and a peace. And I thought that's exactly what I needed at that moment.
Yeah.
Had it not been there, I probably more than likely left and not come back.
Yeah, I feel that so much because I had that experience with a campus cousin and that changed quite a bit for me. And I mean, you're now working within the First Nations Center. I had last semester as well. And I describe the experience as, going out, doing your work. It's really hard. A lot of the emotional labor can be overwhelming. And it's a soft space to land. And you have those people, our conversations that we've had, and it gives me that resiliency. And I think that's kind of, okay, so it's community. It's that support. It's that feeling amongst your people. And I have a question there, but I just love that so much for us because, I mean, it's a very hard process because, can everybody do it? Absolutely. is it extremely hard? Because you will have to come face to face with who you are on so many different levels in so many different ways. What was that like for you?
I'm glad you brought that up. It's an understatement to say it was difficult. Being brought up in the 60s, aging out, I was very fortunate in a way to be in one family since the age of 10. But there's other dynamics to that as well. Yeah. So I found out. It was, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
It was difficult. Yeah. I didn't know my culture whatsoever, nor was I encouraged to know anything about my culture other than the basics. You're Indian. Yeah. Which was the term at the time. Right? Yeah. I didn't know what that meant, right? Yeah. Having students at classes that I attended look down on me or ridicule me or something, I really didn't know what that was about. And I ended up being the wallflower. Yep. But I was deeper than that. I was deeper than the wallflower. And it was, difficult.
You know, that's something interesting that I found my time working in the First Nation Center. The amount of students I've talked to that have previous ministry care or came from that displacement, but myself included, I'd probably say 80 to 90% of the students have experience with that, which I don't actually think faculty or the institution itself necessarily knows. I think the First Nation Center is very aware. You know, food security, those extra supports have always been a part of what they offer and what they do. But how do we even contend with that? Like, how do we even, I mean, a lot of it, because when you see people fall out, it's not, it may be in the beginning, but a lot of it's because, you know, as we move through that process, we don't necessarily receive what we need, or that, you know, the whole decolonize and indigenize. I mean, where do we even start? Because I just, even thinking about it makes me feel overwhelmed, because it's like, there's so much trauma. There's so many kids that come from ministry care. There's so many, like, I mean, yes, community is one thing. How do we start bridging that towards non-Indigenous faculty and towards other non-Indigenous, not supports, but how do we start bringing them in?
Good question. And I've had time to think about this as I was pondering what we were doing today. The initial start for me is, personally, I am so grateful to UNBC for offering First Nation courses. Yeah. It's a start. Yeah. For myself, not knowing my background of indigeneity, right? Taking the courses that I did, start opening the doors of knowledge. But more so than that, it started to identify who I was.
Oh, I love that.
And that made that connection to, I think, dare I say, all First Nations people have this in them, this inner thing. I don't even know what to call it right now. This inner voice, this inner sensation that there's more to life than what's going on. Didn't know what it was, but it was there, gnawing at me over the years. And then I came to UNBC. With no thought other than, I'm going to help my family out financially. Yeah. But as I progressed, I started to learn about First Nations people, which I am Ojibwe. And I started to learn about myself. And in doing so, to start to answer all of those questions that I had deep within me. And the more I learned, the more the answers came, the more I was able to find out who I am. Yeah. And give myself permission to be who I am.
Oh, yes.
You know, I'm silly. Yeah. I give myself permission to be silly, whereas throughout my life is don't be silly, you know. grew up in an environment where children are heard.
Yeah.
I mean, see, not heard.
Yeah.
I wish it was heard.
Yeah.
You know, and so trying to use the voice that I never used was a road of discovery. And just like the pendulum, one way you don't use your voice at all, next thing you know, you can't shut up. You know, but finding that healthy balance.
Yeah.
And the courses, students and staff have certainly helped me. Yeah. And so now I can look in the mirror and look at myself in the eye in the mirror and say, hey, I like you.
Aww.
You're okay. You know?
Yeah.
I can cry. It's okay to cry. Yeah. Found out that, guess what? Crying is healing.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yes.
I didn't at the time. It was, don't cry. Or I'll give you something to cry about. You know, kind of a thing. Right? How many times have we heard that, right? It's okay. And now, the process at UNBC, I have found a level of joy that I've never experienced before. Yeah. I find myself smiling at everybody throughout the day. And I go home and I'm still smiling. And what a wonderful feeling. Yeah. And I would like to see that in everybody. Yeah. Because everybody's entitled, in my mind, to have joy. Yeah. You know? Yes. And with that joy comes hope. Yeah. And with that joy comes dare to dream and go after it. Yeah. Don't let fear stop you, like I'd mentioned earlier. Yeah. You know? You can do it. Set your mind to it. You can do it. Don't believe the lies that you were been told over the years, because they're lies. Yeah. Everybody has great value. Yes. You know, everybody has a voice that needs to be heard. Everybody has a story that needs to be shared to encourage and uplift somebody else who needs it. Yeah. And who may not be at the same stage as you in life. So this is why the responsibility is when you're moving and you're moving forward, you're not doing it alone. You're doing it for others.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because I've been thinking about advocacy a lot lately and that responsibility, because it is very much, you know, an Indigenous way of being. Once you have that knowledge and, you know, that ability to help others, it's assumed that you will move into that and you will take on more of that responsibility. And I think that's both where we're at right now, trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually do that? What do you think? How do we actually do that?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking it, because it's very much in line with what I've been asking myself as of late. For me to be doing this, what I'm doing, never in a million years would I have thunk that this gal would be doing this, right?
Same.
It's, to me, I've discovered that voice inside is my ancestor, is the creator talking to me over those years. And now it's an issue of I am not pursuing things, but I am willing to address what comes in front of me.
Oh, interesting.
This is what's been happening. This has come before me.
Yes.
And so I said, okay, creator, do I do this or not do this? And if I'm supposed to do it, it will work out.
Yes, because so much of what I thought, like anytime I go into a project or research or what I think I'm going to find is never what I'm going to find. And there's a couple of kind of themes that I've been noticing. You know, community and healing are huge. And it always comes back to community and healing. It really does. And I mean, we've been really fortunate, again, to have that First Nation Center. I've been working myself on looking at decolonizing and indigenizing and looking at bridging that gap with non-Indigenous students and faculty. Because I had attended a reconciliation workshop, and it was with different institutions. So there's UNBC, there was CNC, and there's Coast Mountain College. And a lady had stood up, and this has really sat with me, and she had said, you know, we get land acknowledgements, but what next? Where do we go from here? How can we start moving the needle and creating action? And what do you think are some next steps that we need to be taken within the Academy?
Well, any step is a next step as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah.
Right now, in my mind, land acknowledgement is relatively new. It hasn't really specifically been grounded as yet, because I've heard people saying, well, they're just doing it. It's just words. It doesn't have meaning. It's just, meeting protocol, whatever, right? And I'm thinking, might be some truth to that.
Yeah.
And I think the meaning is different to a lot of people. The depth of meaning is different to a lot of people. So I think whatever comes along, truth and reconciliation, I hope and pray that they're not just words.
Yeah.
It's follow through. It's what evolves next, lets you know the depth of which it's moving. And there's so many to consider. It can't be, master of every single one of them.
Yeah.
Some will move forward faster than others.
Yep.
I think it will all depend too on how if it affects people.
Yeah.
So it affects them on a deeper level. It's going to take longer to make progress.
Yeah, because I found, safety is a huge component of that. For myself, I've been thinking about, how do I include ceremony into my methodology, into the work that I'm doing. 'Cause, first of all, ceremony is it's a very subjective thing. And it's hard to describe, because a lot of what academia is looking for is to fit things within boxes and parameters. And that's not always the way of being Indigenous. I just seen a social media post. A social media influence was talking about, submitting her proposal for her research, and she keeps getting resistance and pushback. How do we actually start to bring in some of that indigeneity into what we do? How do we, I don't want to say validate, because I don't think that's the right way to say it, but how do we find a common understanding of something that's so often intangible?
Yeah, it's the one that you just mentioned. Why is there such come back on that?
Yeah,
It's their truth. You speak your truth.
Yeah.
And you can't go sideways on it. It's truth to you.
Yeah.
So when you're sharing that story, I'm thinking, so I think my personally first question is to take the ones that are in conflict with me, with what I'm saying, and say, okay, we need to talk. Yeah.
Maybe, that's interesting.
Why are you coming at me with this is my truth.
Yeah.
But it's not addressing where you're at. So what do you want to hear from me? How do you want to hear it? Because what I'm saying and how I'm saying, which is my truth, you're not getting it. So what is it?
Well,
we need to address that.
Yeah, because the worry is that we're going to Westernize it, and it defeats the purpose, and it takes away our identity when that's done. So I can fit into a box, but that's not, how do you fit spirit into a box? How do you fit, a sacred relationship with an elder? That's a journey. That's, this growth, and it's this personal experience. So it's easy for us to be understood when this space is safe within the First Nations Center. It's when it's not necessarily understood, because, I had this question myself. Do I spend my time trying to convince others to come on board, or do I, help Indigenous people to get to where they're going? And does it have to be an either or question? Because I don't know if it necessarily does, but I haven't figured out a way to reconcile it, because for me, and I have been told that's a colonial perspective, right?
Oh yeah, that's where my mind went.
So it's hard. So it's hard, because it's like, okay, well, how much of it is my voice and my ancestors leading me, and how much of it is conditioning or the system itself? And oh man, how do we even figure out whose voice is whose? And
one of my mottos, I have many, found out, one of my mottos in life is think outside the box.
Yeah.
We have, as First Nations people, have been put into a box, aka reserves, for years, and we haven't got out of the box yet. We try to. They, whoever they are, keeps wanting us to get back into the box. Be contained, behave yourself, this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, no,
that hits.
That's not who we are.
Yeah.
Right? We are more than that. We were more than that from what I've read and heard.
Yeah.
You should just be grateful that we were kind enough to help work with you so you could survive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Going back in history sort of a thing. Think outside the box. Just because the way things were doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Life changes. History changes. The environment changes. There's always change. So that means we change too, or should change. And those that are not willing to change have dug their heels in and saying no. Well, those are the ones, in my mind, you do not focus on.
Yes.
You don't.
Yeah.
What is your truth? Who do you want to address?
Yeah.
What do you want to say? What do you want to encourage? How to lead the way.
Somebody just told me, work with the willing.
Yes.
And I think, and maybe that's interesting because I hadn't quite considered that. Because I think what we're trying to do is, check boxes and all this kind of thing. We're trying to fit into, but I think there's other pathways. And I think what's happening when we get those pathways that are resistant, it's just that's not the way. If it was the way, then it would have been easier to pursue.
Yeah. Life is too short to spend a whole lot of time on individuals who refuse or don't want to listen, period. There's others out there who need to hear what you have to say, or else you wouldn't be here doing what you're doing.
What do you think education needs? What do you think we're missing?
A lot. Like you said earlier, we know what it is. What it was, we know what it is. And without change, you're going to continue.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that's the entire answer. There's more involved, especially when it comes to First Nations people. I believe that more individuals are placing themselves into positions where their voice will have to be heard because they have gone through the so-called system, right? But I think we need more voices to come forward.
Yeah.
We need some change to the education system, but we need it done in a different way than it has been. Because if it was working, we probably wouldn't be having this question to address, right? One of the I've been pondering this, and when it comes to education, if I was in charge, what would I do?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, number one, that's a crazy thought for me. But it just occurred to me that, wow, okay, so let's just deal with this territory. UNBC, I'm a student. I'm Indigenous. Okay. I want to encourage others. I want to encourage not just the younger ones. I want to encourage even seniors. I'm a senior. I want to encourage them too. But there's an awful lot that they carry. So when you address education, that's one thing. Yes, become certified in this, but you need to address the core issues.
Yeah.
So my way of thinking is that if individuals that self-designate as Indigenous, to have a specific course that they can participate in, like I think it was at 100, that specifically targets the baggage. The things that hold them down. So that there's an area, a classroom, an area where like-mindedness is there with issues that are similar, that they can discuss it and find out how to overcome those, what to address, how to look at it, how to find hope, how to be encouraged. Oh boy, I'm getting all goosebumpy.
Yeah. You know what? That's funny because I hadn't considered that. Because even with my experience, because I'm within the faculty of business and economics, and I found with Indigenous students, we have a lot of the same issues that we've had to contend with, executive function, breaking down, becoming overwhelmed. A number of students I've seen have to they've had to take off work because they couldn't handle both work and school at the same time. So yes, we have community, but I think we're missing some of those available resources when it comes to how can we do this in a way that's going to help us and that makes sense? Because we were never taught these skills. You know, part of intergenerational trauma means we never developed multi-step processing. Yes. We never developed ways to manage our emotions. You know, we had a mock exercise for labor relations dispute, and all of the individuals that experienced trauma wouldn't even sit at the table. And it wasn't even real. Like, it wasn't even, you know, there was nothing on the line. It was, I mean, a grade, but it wasn't, you know, make or break or anything like that, but we still wouldn't sit at the table. And that, I think, is part of the issue, is we're not addressing those skills, and we're not addressing those peripheral, you know, we're not looking at it from a holistic perspective. And I think that's part of the problem, is how do we show up as whole beings? Mm-hmm. And I hadn't considered a course or a workshop or, you know, how do we manage all of that kind of thing?
You have many, I don't know, it might be encouraging on the basis that individuals are just that, individualistic in a sense, right? Yeah. So you have some who are willing to speak. So those are the ones that you could group into a workshop. Yeah. To discuss this, to walk through this for specific goals, developing hope, overcoming, healing, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And then you have those who are very wounded, who find it difficult to talk, period.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Being able, you know, having something offered with that, okay, you can talk to somebody about this stuff. Yeah. Let's walk this through together in a safe environment, encourage to speak, to share. Okay. And then they will get to that stage where they might get to that stage where, okay, now I can share. And now you can see the spark and the twinkle in their eye, that there's more hope within them. Well, then they go into the bigger group that are willing to share as a group. So I don't know. When you're dealing with issues, you got to go to the root cause. Yeah. If something is not working, why isn't it working? Yeah. Look at the root cause, address that, and move on from there.
Yeah, because I found, you know, when we had that symposium at the university and looking at, that was kind of the core themes, like healing is leadership. We looked at safe and inclusive spaces, two-eyed seeing, not necessarily as, it's more so as a way to acknowledge that Indigenous knowledges are just as valid. And because the question was, you know, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. What were the next steps that we needed to take? Because, okay, we can recognize and we can understand that we need trauma-informed and that we need psychological safety, but how do we actually take action towards that? Because I know I can work on myself for sure, but now that we're in these leadership roles, in these positions where we are being called to be, you know, step into that responsibility, what next? What do we do? How do we figure this out?
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Trial and error. If something hasn't been tried before, an idea pops up, try it. Never know where that idea would take you and how it would grow. And if it doesn't, well, then guess what? Go to the next idea. At least there's movement of some sorts towards an answer. And I think creators within me, ancestors, there's this, I don't know what to call it. There's this awareness.
Yeah.
That I'm starting to think others have this in them.
Oh, 100%.
So the thing is, let's find them.
Listening to that voice.
Let's find them. Let's encourage them. Let's give them a venue, an outlet to be able to do this so that they too can grow.
Well, you know, and I think it's not that we forgot, and I don't think, but there's almost like a lot of the time it goes to the back of our minds, like we were always community driven. We were always everything, when I ask people what wealth means, or Indigenous people what wealth means, they equate it with a community. It has nothing to do with, capital or, how to invest your money. It's how do we actually rebuild those connections, and how do we create a contemporary community as well? Because we can't go back to pre-colonial times. So yes, we need to address that trauma, but we also need to figure out how we move forward. And actually, one of the, coming back to that reconciliation workshop, it was kind of pinnacle for me, which proves the point of why these things are so important, because they had actually made a framework with the medicine wheel for the school district. And there was this moment where I'm like, oh my goodness, we have to make it up. There was this moment where I'm like, nobody's going to hand what we need to us. We actually have to create it ourselves.
That's part of the healing process.
Yeah.
Take ownership of it.
Well, because we inherently need permission, because of the trauma. For me, that's been my perspective, is that a lot of us are waiting for permission to do something. And there is, if we want our sovereignty back, and that's what we're being given, the opportunity for that sovereignty, we have to be able to make decisions and choices by ourselves. Yes. And nobody is coming to rescue us, because that's not how oppression works. We need to rescue ourselves in order for it to actually have merit and meaning. And so.
Yeah, get away from that seeking approval.
Yep.
Get away from seeking permission. We've had too much of that in life.
Yep.
Now we find out approval seeking within ourselves, getting permission within ourselves.
That inner authority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That voice that says, nope, this is meant for me as well as for others. Whereas growing up, it was meant for others, but not for me.
How did you find your inner authority?
Through UNBC. Through the First Nations study courses.
And I would agree.
That's where where I am today, that's where all of it came from.
Yeah.
It was my tool that I needed to grow, to heal, to learn. And in doing so, it's opening doors. And for me to be even mentioning that I'm seeking masters is phenomenal, really.
Yeah. It's incredibly inspiring. Yeah.
I think, well, like you said earlier, I never would have thunk it in a million years.
Yep.
But also, too, it's other voices that are encouraging.
Yeah.
That says, oh, man, are you going to do masters next? I said, I haven't even got BA yet. What are you talking about, But it's those planting of the seeds.
Yeah.
You can do your masters, you can do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess to simplify this whole thing is try it.
Yeah.
If you haven't done it before, try it.
That's what I keep hearing. I've talked to so many Indigenous people, and they're like, well, I kind of wanted to do that, but I was afraid to give it a try. And it's like, but there's other people there that understand where you're coming from. There's other people there that have walked in your shoes, not specifically your shoes, but very similar shoes. And that's what they're here for. So thank you so much for this. These conversations have been so much more enlightening than I could have ever imagined or hoped for. And again, what you think is going to come out of it is never what comes out. And that's interesting, because it is coming back to that psychological stuff quite a bit. So food for thought, and how can we start to address those next steps? So any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, other than thank you for this opportunity, one that I never would have possibly dreamed of in my wildest dreams, not even in my dreams. The only thing I could say that I want to say, and I hope it resonates all around, try it.
Yep.
Just try it.
Yep.
You may go in with trembling and a great deal of fearfulness, but don't let past stop you.
Yep.
It's done enough of that.
Yep.
Take back your ownership of yourself.
Yeah.
And just try it. You will never know where it's going to take you. And more than likely, you'd be very surprised.
I love that so much.
So thank you.
All right. Thank you.